What's good? It's DJ Sun coming at you live and direct from Baltimore, Maryland. We're in the 1045 green room right now. You know what it is.
Real quick. What's up? 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 Let's take it there real quick. Go ahead, try me. Try me. Go ahead, try me. Come on, try me. Go ahead, try me.
So I'm DJ Sun. I'm a turntablist / producer. I work in hip hop and dance music. So a lot of club music, house music, grooves from around the world, and really into turntablism. A little bit of a nerd with that. Do a lot of scratching and whatnot. But the dance floor is really important to me too. So I play a lot of different events, a lot of different activations. Love to travel. Blessed to travel for this work, and yeah, do a lot of different things with music. Work with film a little bit. You know the vibes. You know, there's like the classic stuff. Like you look up and you see somebody doing backflips, and you're like, you know, okay, you know what I mean? And shout out Philly. I always joke, you know, people are like, oh, nobody break dances anymore, and I always say like, nah, you could go to a club in Philly this Friday, and you will see somebody doing a backflip and spinning on their head somewhere in the city, guaranteed. So I always love that. I love when I see people like, you know, really showing out. You know, sometimes it'll be like the Voguers, the break dancers. Shit, I seen people bust like kick flips and bust the skateboards out on the dance floor. But you know, it ranges. You know, I've been at the parties where you know somebody pulls out a gun. That's like the wrong side of crazy. You know, at the event, and then I don't know. You know. In the crowd. Oh man, in front of the stage and behind the booth. You know what I mean? People wild out because the thing about a party and being in a DJ booth is like, you know, you're when you're in the crowd, you feel like, oh, I'm in the mix. Nobody can see what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Nobody's worried about me in this room of 200, 300, 1,000 other people. But from the DJ booth, like that's the perfect place to watch the movie happen. You know what I mean? So you watching people fall in love, you watching people fall out of love, you watching, you know, deals happen, you watching the things that are gonna create the waves for whatever's about to happen that next week happens at the club on the weekend, you know? And that's something I love about DJing. So because of that, you see a lot of crazy stuff. But I feel like it's always like subtle because when you're in it, you see some shit, and then you're falling asleep that night, and you're like, did that motherfucker? Yeah, damn. Then you gotta call your homie, and you're like, yo, you saw that? And then you go through the footage of the recap. You know, your photographer, video homie will send you like mad footage. That's my favorite thing after an event because when I'm DJing, I'm super locked in. Like everything disappears. I'm sweating. You know, if you watch like my sets online and stuff, I be zoned in. So sometimes I like pick up on stuff or subconsciously see something and don't really clock it. And then I love to watch all the footage because that's when I really get to see what happened, how people were responding to certain transitions, but also all the nut shit that happened in the crowd. Like I got your ass. Like so I don't know. It's you know, anybody who spends enough time in nightlife, you're gonna see some crazy things. And I feel like growing up in Baltimore, it set me up for that. I remember when I was a kid, like, you know, you never know what you're gonna see on the street in Baltimore. I used to take the light rail to school. I would just see the craziest stuff. Like somebody rolled a blunt one time. I'm sitting next to him, and I'm too young to like buy Rellos or whatever. So I think I talked to him and like bought a cigarello off of him. We were just talking. He rolls a blunt up. Train comes, and he's like, all right, peace. I'm like, all right. Sparks that bitch. Gets on the train. And in that moment, I was just like, yeah, he's doing his thing for real, you know? But, you know, so like, I don't know. You can't move with expectations. Otherwise, you know, things are really going to take you out. So you kind of just got to have a even keel in this industry because you're gonna see some wild stuff. Yeah. So that's a fun fact. I got some crazy lore, you know, in a lot of different places in my life. I'm fortunate to have a very well-rounded uh, upbringing as far as experiences. And my family is in production. My mom's in production. My dad's in the crew, so like lighting and stuff. And they worked on the wire. So like there were some days when if I was sick at school, there was nowhere to go. Like they couldn't just send me home because no one was home. So I would just have to go sit on the set of the wire, like sit over there, don't touch nothing. You know what I mean? And you know, it was a couple years, and it was like I must have been like when I was like I don't know, like 8 to when I was like 13. So you know, I was really growing up then. I remember the fourth season, I was like the same age as the kids in that season. They were like a little bit older than me. My older brother was like 3.5 years older than me, and I think they were like right in between us. So like, you know, a lot of us got close, you know. So that was cool, and I'm still in touch with a lot of those folks today. I mean, you know, on some other shit, like The Wire was just a very, very special um, set. You know what I mean? In the film industry and in art production in general, you know, it can be a lot of different vibes, but nobody had ever done anything like that, let alone in Baltimore. So, you know, when you walk around Baltimore and The Wire comes up, there's always somebody in the conversation who's like, oh, my cousin did this, or my brother did this, my sister, whatever. And, you know, it's because like that whole set wasn't some Hollywood folks. That was just a bunch of people from Baltimore trying to talk about a lot of the stuff going on. So because of that, like it was a real, felt like a family endeavor. You know what I mean? Obviously for me, it literally was, but yeah, nah, I learned a lot on that set about like thinking later, now that I'm in production and music and stuff, I realized that a lot of the lessons I learned was from that. Just seeing, you know, on a set, it's like one of the few places where you got somebody with who's a repeat felon next to somebody with a PhD, and they got the same job title, but the dude with the PhD is in trouble because he showed up late today. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter where you were yesterday or before you clocked in, as long as you show up ready to work and ready to learn and ready to, you know, run it up. And that's a rare thing in this world. So, you know, a real like judged by your prowess and, you know, your skill and your work ethic, you know, that was a cool environment to be around. Shout out to all the film heads, man, because, you know, when we throw these DIY shows, I'm like, all right, we can make anything happen. And then seeing the homies that pull off like the independent film stuff, I'm like, yo, how are y'all doing this? Like the amount of moving parts in that stuff. So mad respect to anybody in film, and shout out to the Wire fans. Why did I pick DJing? Yeah, so I went to Baltimore School for the Arts. So it was a classical music program. I was playing instruments, and I loved music. I always loved music. I always listened to a lot of different genres. My brother was into like some hip hop, but really he was into like Daft Punk and techno, and like this is like early 2000s and stuff. My dad was into punk. You know, my mom and dad are from New York, so my dad was into punk. My mom was into like Grateful Dead, folk music, and stuff like that. But my dad put me onto like De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest when I was a kid. And as I grew up in Baltimore, you know, I was studying all these different kinds of music at different levels. But the stuff I was always listening to was a lot of hip hop. I loved blues. I loved funk. And, you know, one day it kind of clicked. I realized that all of my favorite beats, shout out Premier, Pete Rock, you know, Q-Tip, all these beats were made on turntables. You can always hear, like, if you're a hip hop head, you can know the difference between a beat that was chopped up on turntables versus MPC. Kanye, it's more MPC. Premier, that's more on a turntable, just chops, right? And when I realized that and put two and two together, like, it was at the same time as, like, this is kind of crazy, but as the dubstep era. So on one side, I'm seeing, like, being introduced to DJing through that stuff and, like, going to raves. I used to break into the Wrecker. You remember the Wrecker in Towson? It was, like, the only place they would let me in. I was, like, 16, and we would sneak in, and we didn't even like that music, but it was just, like, the craziest environment. You know, those raves back then, everybody was wearing, like, crazy colors, all the bracelets. You know, a couple of public school kids, we were just like, what the hell? But so that intrigued me, and then at the same time, I put two and two together, realized that, like, my favorite hip hop music was made on turntables. So the iPhone, that's what it was. The iPod Touch had just came out, and I had the app, the DJ app. My homie showed me that, and it was a wrap. After that, I was like, all right, I'm going to get some equipment, got like $100 mixer, started DJing my homies' parties, and the equipment paid for itself. Got something nicer, kept going with it. But really what it was that, like, I was terrible at playing instruments. Like, I got into BSA, thank God. I don't know where I would have went to high school otherwise. And, like, so long story, I played harp, right? Random, I'm telling you, the lore is crazy. So I played harp, right? And how many harpists do you know? Not a lot. So when I go to BSA to audition, they're like, they don't even hear. No, I'm not saying I didn't audition. Like, I auditioned, but they probably didn't even listen. They were like, yeah, Eason, sign him up. We need a harpist. You know what I mean? So, like, at BSA, if you don't know, like, this is a cutthroat program. I got homies that, on the jazz and classical world are just running it up right now. I had a friend, Yuka, who she had already played at Carnegie Hall as a soloist, and we're like 15. You know what I mean? So I was just like trying to keep up. You know what I mean? But I played an instrument that was rare, so they were like, all right, let him rock. But it didn't click with my soul. You know what I mean? It really felt like I was loving something that didn't love me back. I was struggling. I had my homegirl Zoe in the cello section. I would look up and she would tell me every time I was supposed to start playing, because I can read music and all that, but I was not up to par. You know what I mean? So it was a group effort for me to pass those classes. And then when I found DJing and production and, like, making beats and stuff, it clicked. Sometimes I think that, we can find the art that we really love and be in the space that we really love, but sometimes you got to shift your weight a little bit to really find where you fit in. So when I found DJing and production, it felt like everything clicked. And when everything clicks, everything starts getting easier. So everything just started moving and felt organic, and I felt like I had found my voice, In Baltimore, that's a part of our tradition on the dance floor. You know what I mean? And whether it's in hip hop or in club music, you always got somebody on the mic and, hyping the crowd up, being the MC, being the host. So I think that it does something to amp the crowd up, but it also personifies the folks on stage. You know what I mean? If you're just spinning, there's a little bit of a separation where, if maybe you're in a club where there's not a lot of visibility. You know what I mean? And when you speak and you talk to the people, all of a sudden it's a person. You know what I mean? And I remember I was in Philly. I went to school in Philly, and that's where I really learned my turntablism and started to really push my DJing stuff. And Philly is the same way as Baltimore with those norms on the dance floor. Philly and Baltimore got a lot of similar chemistry as far as that. But I remember it was the other way. I went to the club one night. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was this well-known, he's stamped in Philly, great DJ. We were at this spot called Noto, which is a club that Meek partially owns, big club. And this motherfucker is talking through every transition. Hits all night. We got blah, 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 blah. He was doing this shit where you, like, say something that kind of references the name of the track you're about to drop. It was just the corniest shit I've ever seen. And, like, also, like, he was using it as a crutch. Like, those transitions were ass. If you took away what he was saying and talking, it would have really shown. But he was just talking through everything, reverb, echo, air horn, drop the next one. And I was like, yo, I never want to be like this, So at that point, I started really paying attention because I knew I wanted to learn how to talk on the mic because it's awkward at first, But I also knew I didn't want to be like those radio DJs where that, like, the iHeartRadio DJs that are just like, we're getting lit, let's get it, bottles over here. I was like, I didn't want to be one of those. So at that point in time, I just started paying attention to the people that I felt like really did it genuinely, and I started subtly. And that's what I always tell DJs, like, because people tell me that. They're like, oh, you got good presence on the mic. And I think it's like, you just got to be yourself. Be yourself. Don't say nothing that you wouldn't say, but, keep it positive. Be a little bit bold, you know what I mean? But I definitely think that it's an important tool. In hip hop, I think that it's a norm, and I think in techno and house music, it's kind of It's kind of like an unspoken rule: don't fucking touch the mic. And it's, I think that ultimately at the root of it, it's an ego thing in that world. It's like, it's not about us. Let's transcend together. Which I'm here for that, but I'm also just like, come on, y'all. Like, just talk to the fucking people. You know what I mean? I also feel like if you have a certain amount of people in a fucking room on the same page and you got a mic, you better fucking say something, yo. You know what I mean? It can't just be a party. So you gotta, establish the intention in the room and all that. But I do feel self-conscious. Sometimes I'll be on like a house lineup or playing at a rave or something, and I know all the other people are like, wearing all their black and chains and stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's some real techno shit. I better not touch that mic. You know what I mean? But I mean, that Freddie Gibbs joint was kind of fire. That was kind of up there. So if you don't know, me and Lord Luck played a direct support show. Freddie Gibbs came on a tour, came through Baltimore. So, we had to touch down and do our thing, soundstage. And it was like, I think it was a sold out show. I always like, if there's time, John knows, I'm always like looking at the set times when we get to shows. I'm like, all right, where can I fit a 15-minute DJ set in? You know what I mean? And this is one of those nights where there was a little bit of time for that. So, you know, just getting to do my thing for real before John goes on. That was a great night. That was a great show. I just want to say, bet on yourselves. You know what I'm saying? This DJ thing, like, I feel like I've been saying this a lot in these last couple of months because shit is getting critical right now. But, I feel like I'm done with expectations. This DJ thing and this music thing has blown all of my expectations. And if you really put in the work and love the practice, I always say the work is the prize. You feel me? So if you have that mentality, this shit will take you everywhere and back. There's no reason my ass should have been on a private island during Art Basel DJing on Star Island. That's the shit that's in GTA Vice City, that little island with all the rich houses and stuff. That shit is real. My first time in Miami, I'm DJing there. You know what I mean? So that's just an example of the places this stuff will take you. It'll open doors for you and take you some crazy places, introduce you to some of the best people you ever met and some of the worst people you ever met. But, it's always solid and real. So, fuck around and find out, bet on yourself. You know the deal.